Welcome to my channel. Try to hear the latest story.
I'm Todd, 32 years old, and I still remember the exact weight of that chore list in my hands at my brother's baby shower. You know that feeling when you realize you're not actually a guest? The pristine cardstock felt heavier than the expensive baby monitor I'd brought as a gift. I stood frozen in the entryway, watching real guests being welcomed with champagne, while I held detailed instructions for where to put the coats and how often to refill ice buckets. What they didn't know was what I had waiting on my laptop. Before I tell you what happened next, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, hit subscribe, and stick around to see how a single email changed my family forever. Growing up, Jackson was more than just my older brother. 4 years my senior, he was my hero, my protector, and sometimes my only ally in our high-pressure household. We shared not just a bedroom with twin beds positioned under windows that let in the summer breeze, but also countless fishing trips to Lake Powell, where he taught me to bait hooks and clean catches. Those early mornings on the water, mist rising around our small boat, were when Jackson seemed most like himself, away from our parents' expectations. Our father, Richard, built his construction supply company from scratch, turning a small operation into a regional powerhouse through sheer force of will and business acumen that bordered on ruthlessness. His definition of success was narrow: financial achievement, social standing, and carrying on the family name through the business. Mother, Karen, complemented his ambition perfectly, transforming from a small-town beauty queen to a socialite who orchestrated charity galas and country club events with military precision. Together they constructed a life of material comfort and social influence, but warmth was a commodity in short supply. Jackson fit perfectly into their vision. Captain of the football team, class president, business school at an Ivy League university, followed by a seamless transition into the family company where he quickly became Dad's right-hand man. His trajectory was as predictable as it was celebrated at every family gathering, every holiday dinner, every casual conversation with neighbors or business associates. I was the aberration, quieter, more interested in computers than contracts, preferring books to ball games. My accomplishments in math competitions and coding projects earned nods of acknowledgement, but never the enthusiastic pride that met Jackson's touchdowns or business deals. When I expressed interest in computer science rather than business administration for college, Dad's disappointment manifested as a cutting remark at Sunday dinner. At least one son understands what it means to carry on a legacy. Amanda, our sister, navigated her middle child status by becoming the perfect daughter. 2 years younger than Jackson and 2 years older than me, she learned early to align herself with power. At first, it hurt when she would join Jackson in teasing me about being the weird one. Over time, I came to recognize it as her survival strategy, a way to ensure she remained in the warmth of parental approval rather than out in the cold with me. The transformation in Jackson was gradual but unmistakable. The brother who once stood up for me when Dad criticized my science fair project instead of attending his football game slowly became someone who initiated the jokes at my expense. The turning point came during my sophomore year of high school when I won a statewide programming competition. At dinner that night, as I started to share the news, Jackson interrupted with an announcement about being named in a business journal's 30 under 30 list. My achievement evaporated in the explosion of excitement that followed. When I caught his eye across the celebration, there was something new there, something that said clearly, "There's only room for one successful son in this family." Extended family followed my parents' lead, like a well-rehearsed dance troupe. Uncle Steve, Dad's brother and business partner, treated Jackson like a second son while struggling to remember basic details about my life. Aunt Patricia, Mom's sister, always asked about my computer hobby as if waiting for me to outgrow it. Cousins, grandparents, family, friends, all took their cues from the top, and the message was consistent. Jackson matters. Todd is peripheral. After graduating with honors in computer science, I faced my first real battle with Dad when I declined his reluctant offer to find something for you in IT at the company. Instead, I moved to Seattle and joined a small tech startup focused on supply chain logistics software. The irony that I was still working in a field adjacent to the family business wasn't lost on me, but the difference was I was building something on my own terms. Those early years were lean and difficult. While Jackson was gifted a luxury condo and executive title, I shared an apartment with 3 other developers and worked 14-hour days trying to help our fledgling company survive. Each time I returned home for obligatory holiday gatherings, I endured variations of still playing with computers. And when are you going to get a real job? From Dad, uncomfortable silence from Mom, performative sympathy from Amanda, and Jackson's practiced look of benevolent concern that never reached his eyes. Family events became exercises in endurance. At Christmas dinner last year, despite being in my 30s, I was seated at the children's table, while distant cousins and business associates took places at the main table with my parents, Jackson, and Amanda. At Dad's retirement party, the photographer arranged family photos with me standing awkwardly on the periphery, easily cropped out of the core family shots that were ultimately framed and displayed. When Amanda married her equally status-conscious husband, I learned I wasn't in the wedding party when the formal, wear-fitting invitation excluded my name. Each slight burned, but I taught myself to appear unbothered, to focus on building my own life far from their judgment. What none of them knew was that while they were dismissing my career as a dead end, the logistics software I had helped develop was revolutionizing how companies managed inventory and shipments. While they assumed I was barely scraping by, our company was quietly securing contracts with larger and larger clients, each success building towards something that would eventually force my family to see me differently, whether they wanted to or not. The invitation arrived in my email on a Tuesday morning, sandwiched between a project update from my development team and a meeting request from our biggest investor. The subject line read, "Jackson and Megan's baby celebration," with a digital card featuring soft blues and yellows, cartoon storks, and the details of the shower 3 weeks away at my parents' home in Connecticut. My immediate reaction was surprise, followed quickly by suspicion. In the 5 years since I'd left for Seattle, I'd received exactly 3 personal communications from Jackson, a group text announcing his engagement, a formal wedding invitation that arrived after Amanda let slip that Mom had initially suggested not inviting me at all, and a terse email when their pregnancy was announced to extended family. The suspicion must have shown on my face when my assistant popped in to drop off coffee, because she asked if something was wrong. "My brother's having a baby shower," I explained, aware of how strange my lack of enthusiasm must have sounded. "I'm just trying to figure out why I was invited." That evening, as I was reviewing code in my downtown apartment with its view of Puget Sound, my phone lit up with Jackson's name. We hadn't spoken directly in over 8 months. "Todd, did you get the shower invite?" His voice had that forced enthusiasm I recognized from client meetings, the tone he used when trying to close a difficult sale. I did. "Congratulations again. How's Megan feeling?" I kept my tone neutral, protective. "She's great," Doctor says. "Everything's perfect. Listen, we really want you there. I know things have been, well, not great between everyone. But this is important. New life, new beginnings, all that. Mom's going all out with the planning, and Megan specifically asked if you'd be coming." Something in his voice, a note of sincerity perhaps, made me want to believe him. "Really? Megan asked about me?" "Of course. You're going to be an uncle. That's a big deal." There was a pause, and then, "It would mean a lot to me too, having my brother there." The conversation continued with catching up about superficial topics, carefully navigating around any mention of our parents' attitude toward me or the tensions that had defined our relationship for years. By the time we hung up, a small, stubborn part of me had kindled with hope. Perhaps the impending arrival of the next generation really was softening hearts. Perhaps Jackson, faced with becoming a father himself, was reconsidering the value of brotherhood. This fragile hope sustained me through several text exchanges in the weeks that followed. Jackson sent ultrasound images with "your future niece or nephew" captions. He asked about my flight details and offered to pick me up from the airport. When I mentioned booking a hotel, he insisted I stay at their house, though he backpedaled quickly when I accepted, explaining that the guest room was being converted to a nursery and suggesting my old room at our parents' house instead. I declined, keeping my hotel reservation. Despite my lingering wariness, I spent considerable time selecting the perfect gift. I finally settled on a premium baby monitor system with features that exceeded anything on their registry, along with a significant contribution to a college fund I secretly established in the unborn child's name. I arranged time off work, declining an important meeting with potential investors to ensure I could make the cross-country trip. My team looked at me strangely when I explained I needed to attend my brother's baby shower, clearly aware of how little my family usually figured in my life. The morning of the shower, I stood in my hotel room staring at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. This time will be different, I told myself, adjusting my collar and checking that the baby monitor was perfectly wrapped in pale blue paper with a silver ribbon. I'd chosen casual but expensive attire, a subtle signal of my success that wouldn't appear ostentatious, the kind of understated luxury my parents always respected in others. The drive to my parents' home in their exclusive neighborhood brought back a flood of memories. Nothing much had changed in the years since I'd left, the manicured lawns and imposing facades still projecting wealth and stability. As I approached, I noticed cars already lining the circular driveway, forcing me to park nearly a block away. Juggling the gift and my laptop bag, which I rarely traveled without, I made my way up the long walk, noting the blue and silver balloons adorning the entrance and the professional flower arrangements visible through the large front windows. My mother answered my knock, her practiced smile firmly in place. Karen Lawson had maintained her beauty through rigorous devotion to fitness, cosmetic procedures, and the careful management of negative emotions, which were never displayed but rather channeled into cutting remarks disguised as concern. "Todd, you made it." Not "I'm glad you made it," or "welcome," or any of the warm greetings I'd heard her offer other guests through the open door before she'd seen it was me. "You can put the gift on the table in the dining room." She was already turning away, attention shifting to someone more important behind me. Amanda appeared in the foyer, designer dress and perfect makeup making her look like Mom's younger clone. Her eyes flickered over me, taking in my appearance with a swift assessment that resulted in the barest nod of acknowledgement. "You're late," she said, though I was actually 15 minutes early according to the invitation. "Jackson's friends from the club are already here. They brought the most amazing custom rocking horse, hand-carved in Vermont." I glimpsed Jackson in the living room, surrounded by a group of men in nearly identical business casual attire, all looking like they'd stepped from the pages of the same preppy catalog. He caught my eye briefly, raised his hand in a half-wave, then returned his attention to whatever story had the group laughing appreciatively. The house was transformed with decorations that must have cost thousands, a professional touch evident in every perfectly placed element. A catering staff moved efficiently through the space, offering trays of hors d'oeuvres and champagne flutes to guests who were clearly divided into tiers of importance. Business associates and family friends occupied the central living room with its view of the garden. Extended family filled the adjoining sunroom, while household staff and a few people I didn't recognize were directed toward the kitchen when they arrived. No one offered to take my coat. No one offered me champagne. No one, in fact, seemed to notice I existed beyond the initial acknowledgments. Standing alone in the entry after depositing my gift, I had the distinct feeling I had misunderstood something fundamental about my invitation. I was contemplating whether to approach Jackson's circle or find a quiet corner to observe from when Mom reappeared, this time with a printed sheet of paper which she thrust into my hand without ceremony. "Since you're here, you might as well make yourself useful," she said, voice lowered, as though we were conspirators rather than mother and son. "The hired help is short-staffed today." Looking down, I found myself holding a detailed list of tasks printed in Mom's preferred font, each item meticulously bullet-pointed. "Fill ice buckets in bar area and kitchen. Replace as needed. Take guests' coats to the upstairs blue bedroom. Assist catering staff with passing appetizers when they're short-handed. Ensure bathrooms remain stocked with guest towels. Help clear gift wrapping during opening. Remain for cleanup after guests depart." I stared at the list, then back at her, waiting for some indication this was a poorly conceived joke. Her expression remained impassive, expectant. "You want me to work at the shower? As staff?" I kept my voice level, conscious of nearby guests who might overhear. "Don't be dramatic, Todd. Everyone's pitching in. Jackson's so busy with his important guests, and we're shorthanded with the service company. Just make yourself useful for once." With that, she turned and glided back toward a group of her friends, all wearing the same tennis club membership pins on their expensive cashmere sweaters. Initially, I complied out of sheer disbelief, thinking perhaps this was some strange initiation that would end with inclusion once I'd proven willing to help. I stashed my laptop bag in a corner of the kitchen, rolled up my sleeves, and began filling ice buckets from the commercial ice maker in the garage, ferrying them to the bars set up throughout the first floor. After about 20 minutes of this, during a lull when the caterers seemed to have everything under control, I attempted to join Jackson's conversation circle. They were discussing some recent corporate merger, and I thought I might contribute something relevant given my company's tangential involvement in the deal's logistics. "Todd," Jackson said as I approached, his tone friendly but his eyes cold. "Perfect timing. We need more ice in here, and Megan's grandmother needs someone to fetch her shawl from the car. Silver Lexus in the side drive. She has the keys." I stood perfectly still, aware of curious glances from his friends. "I thought I might join you guys for a bit. I haven't met most of your friends yet." Jackson's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Plenty of time for that later. Right now, we really need that ice. Mom said you were helping out today." As I retreated, ice bucket in hand, I heard one of the men ask, "Who was that?" And Jackson's response, "Just my brother. He's going through a rough patch, so we're letting him earn some cash helping out today." The lie stung worse than the dismissal. I wasn't hurting for money, and Jackson knew it, but the fiction served his narrative about his less successful brother, the family charity case. The final revelation came an hour later when guests were being directed to their seats for lunch and the gift opening. Long tables had been set up in the extended sunroom, each place beautifully set with hand-calligraphed name cards on delicate stands. Moving through the room under the pretense of checking water glasses, I searched for my name among the settings, finding nothing. A middle-aged woman I recognized as one of Mom's bridge club friends noticed my search. "Are you looking for your seat, young man?" For a moment I thought she was being helpful, until she continued, "The catering staff is eating in shifts in the kitchen, I believe. Though you seem overdressed for waitstaff." She squinted at me through her glasses. "Are you from the event company?" Before I could respond, Mom appeared at my elbow, smoothly intervening. "He's just helping out, Margaret, my younger son Todd. He's so good with this sort of thing." The way she emphasized this sort of thing made it clear what category of person she considered me. Margaret's expression cleared in understanding. How wonderful to have a helpful son. Mine are absolutely useless around the house. She patted my arm condescendingly before moving on to find her assigned seat. I turned to face my mother, keeping my voice low but firm. "Where am I sitting, Mom?" Her perfectly composed expression didn't falter. "Don't be ridiculous, Todd. You're helping with the event. The servers don't sit with the guests, you know that." "I'm not a server. I'm your son, Jackson's brother, the baby's uncle." Something hardened in her gaze then, a cold calculation that had always terrified me as a child. "You're lucky we even let you in the house after that embarrassing scene you caused at Christmas. Now, stop making a fuss and go do something useful. The ice in the kitchen is getting low." Amanda appeared beside us, her timing impeccable as always. "Problem?" she asked, though her tone made it clear she already knew the answer. "Todd seems to think he's a guest rather than helping out," Mom replied. The two of them suddenly a united front. Amanda rolled her eyes with practiced disdain. "Seriously, Todd, go fill the ice buckets. People are waiting for drinks." They both stared at me, twin expressions of dismissal and irritation, waiting for me to slink away as I always had before. Around us, conversations continued, glasses clinked, and soft music played while guests found their seats, the perfect social tableau continuing uninterrupted except for this small, tense bubble of family dysfunction. I looked past them to where Jackson stood with his wife, his hand protectively on her pregnant belly, as they accepted congratulations and directed people to their seats. He caught my eye briefly, and I saw something there. Not guilt exactly, but awareness. He knew exactly what was happening and was allowing it, perhaps even orchestrating it. In that moment, several things became crystal clear to me. This had been the plan all along. The invitation, the phone call, the text messages, all designed to get me here, not as family but as unpaid help, another person to be ordered around during their perfect event. The final insult in a lifetime of being treated as less than. And I decided I was finished accepting it. My journey in tech began with failure, something my family never let me forget. After graduating and turning down Dad's reluctant offer to find something for me at the family company, I moved across the country with nothing but student debt, a used laptop, and stubborn determination to prove myself on my own terms. The startup I joined, Tech Solutions, was running on fumes when I arrived. Our small team of 5 worked out of a converted warehouse space where the heat failed regularly in winter, and the ancient air conditioning provided minimal relief in summer. We subsisted on ramen and coffee, working 14-hour days trying to perfect our logistics management software that nobody seemed interested in buying. 6 months in, we faced the very real prospect of shutting down. Our initial seed funding was nearly depleted, and potential investors were declining meetings after hearing about our lack of traction. It was during this low point that I met Martin Decker, a grizzled tech veteran who'd made his fortune in the first dot-com boom and had since dedicated himself to mentoring promising but struggling startups. Martin saw what others didn't, both in our software and in me personally. Your approach to predictive inventory management is 3 years ahead of what's currently in the market, he told me after I walked him through the code architecture. The problem isn't your product, it's your pitch and your patience. With Martin's guidance and a small but crucial bridge investment, we refined both our software and our approach to selling it. Instead of trying to revolutionize entire supply chains overnight, we identified specific pain points we could solve immediately while building toward the larger vision. Martin also connected me with Elena Rodriguez, a brilliant UX designer who transformed our clunky interface into something intuitive and visually appealing. Our first breakthrough came when a mid-sized regional grocery chain agreed to implement our system in 3 of their distribution centers as a pilot program. The results exceeded even our optimistic projections: 28% reduction in overstock, 34% improvement in on-time deliveries, and measurable labor cost savings through more efficient routing. The grocery chain signed a full contract and became our most enthusiastic reference. This success created a modest but steady revenue stream that kept us afloat while we improved the product and slowly built our client base. Each new implementation taught us more about real-world applications and edge cases, allowing us to refine the software into something truly exceptional. By the end of our second year, we had expanded the team to 12 people and moved into proper office space. During this entire period, my family remained dismissive of my career. On my infrequent visits home, Dad would introduce me to his business associates as my son, who's still trying to make it in computers out west, while Mom would change the subject whenever anyone asked what I did for a living. At family gatherings, I deflected questions about my work with vague answers, learning that sharing details only invited comparisons to Jackson's real job at the family company. The true turning point for Logitech came in our 3rd year, when a major national retailer facing logistics nightmares during holiday seasons approached us after hearing about our results with the grocery chain. Their supply chain complexity was an order of magnitude beyond anything we'd handled before, but we saw it as our chance to prove our scalability. For 6 months, I practically lived in their distribution centers, working alongside their team to customize and implement our system. The hours were brutal, the pressure intense, but when Black Friday arrived and their logistics operated with unprecedented smoothness, we knew we'd achieved something remarkable. Their CEO personally thanked me at their year-end meeting, announcing that our software had saved them an estimated $12 million in that single holiday season. Word spread quickly through the industry. Suddenly, we weren't chasing clients. They were coming to us. Our team grew to 50, then 100. We opened offices in 3 cities. Venture capital firms that had previously declined meetings were now calling weekly, eager to invest at valuations we would have considered fantasy just years earlier. 5 years after that humiliating Christmas dinner where I was seated with children while the family discussed Jackson's latest promotion, Logitech Solutions was valued at over $300 million. As co-founder and chief technical officer, my personal stake was substantial, even before considering the strategic investments I'd made with my earlier earnings, many in areas adjacent to my parents' construction supply business. What my family didn't know, what I had deliberately kept from them, was that I now had a net worth that exceeded the combined value of the family business and all their personal assets. I owned significant minority stakes in 3 of their major suppliers. Through a private equity group I'd invested with, I controlled substantial debt held by Dad's company, arranged through shell corporations that obscured my connection. I hadn't planned this as leverage initially. These were simply sound investments in industries I understood thanks to growing up in the business. But as their treatment of me worsened, rather than improved over the years, I began to see the potential strategic value in my position. After particularly hurtful family encounters, I would sometimes find comfort in knowing I could, if I chose, exert considerable financial influence over their lives. But I never wanted to be that person, the one who used money as a weapon. What I wanted was so much simpler and yet apparently impossible: to be treated as an equal member of the family, respected for my choices even if they differed from the prescribed path. I kept hoping that time and maturity would naturally heal the dysfunction, that perhaps my parents would eventually recognize my success on its own terms. When Jackson's baby shower invitation arrived, I'd briefly hoped it signaled that healing had begun. Perhaps becoming a father was giving my brother perspective on family bonds. Perhaps my parents, soon-to-be grandparents, were softening. This hope explained why I'd traveled across the country, gift in hand, heart cautiously open to reconciliation. Standing in their kitchen now, holding a list of chore assignments instead of being welcomed as family, I finally accepted the truth. Nothing was going to change unless I forced the issue. The decision I'd been avoiding for years crystallized in that moment of clarity. Not revenge, but a long overdue reckoning. The kitchen was momentarily empty as guests gathered in the sunroom for lunch and the gift-opening ceremony. I could hear the murmur of conversation and occasional laughter from the other room, the sounds of a celebration continuing without me. The irony wasn't lost on me that in being excluded, I had also been given privacy at a crucial moment. I retrieved my laptop bag from where I'd stashed it and set up on the granite countertop beside the commercial-grade refrigerator. My hands trembled slightly as I opened the computer and logged in, a physical manifestation of the emotional crossroads I faced. Part of me wanted simply to leave, to walk out the door and never return, cutting ties completely with the family that had never valued me. Dr. Simmons, the therapist I'd been seeing for the past year to work through my family issues, had suggested this might eventually be the healthiest option. Blood relation doesn't obligate you to accept mistreatment, she'd told me during our last session, not knowing how prescient her words would prove. But walking away would mean they won again. It would reinforce their narrative that I was the problem, the oversensitive one who couldn't handle family teasing, the failure who disappeared because he couldn't measure up. More importantly, it would mean I'd failed to stand up for myself yet again. My email was already open from earlier that morning when I'd been handling work matters from my hotel room. I navigated to a folder labeled Contingencies, created months ago but never accessed until now. Inside were 4 draft emails, each meticulously prepared with legal consultation, each addressed to different members of my family, each containing information that would irrevocably change our dynamic. I had created these messages after the Christmas dinner incident, a therapeutic exercise recommended by Dr. Simmons to help process my anger without acting on it impulsively. Write down what you wish you could say or do, she'd suggested, then save it somewhere private. The act of articulating your feelings can be cathartic, even if you never send it. But these weren't angry rants or emotional outbursts. They were calm, factual notifications of financial positions I held that affected each family member directly. Positions I had acquired legally and ethically through my own success, but had never leveraged until now. My finger hovered over the mouse. Once sent, there would be no going back. Our relationship would be fundamentally altered for better or worse. I took a deep breath, reminded myself of the chore list still sitting on the counter beside me, and clicked Send All. The first email went to my father, informing him that through a private equity firm I'd invested with, I now held controlling interest in the debt financing his company had secured for its recent expansion. The terms remained unchanged, but the notification legally required him to acknowledge the change in debt ownership. The second went to Uncle Steve, detailing my acquisition of the mortgage on both his primary residence and vacation home in the Hamptons, previously held by a regional bank that had been absorbed by a larger financial institution where I had connections. Again, terms remained the same, but the psychological impact of knowing I controlled his housing debt would be significant. The third email was addressed to Jackson, notifying him that the anonymous donation that had funded the complete renovation of their nursery, arranged through Megan's interior designer as a contest prize, had come from me. Furthermore, The generous gift from the Future Fund Foundation establishing a college account for their unborn child was also my creation, with me as the primary administrator. The final message went to Mom, the shortest but perhaps most impactful, informing her that her cherished country club membership, which she believed was a legacy from her parents, had actually lapsed 3 years earlier due to unpaid dues during a period of financial strain she and Dad had kept secret. The reinstatement and subsequent dues had been anonymously covered by me through arrangements with the club's financial office. I closed the laptop and waited. Within my view was the sleek, expensive refrigerator with family photos held by magnets, carefully curated snapshots of a perfect family that somehow never included me. The catering staff had left platters of beautifully arranged food for the servers' use. The irony of my exclusion providing me this perfect private moment for my response wasn't lost on me. 10 minutes passed before I heard the first indication that my messages had been received. A sharp exclamation from the dining area, followed by hurried footsteps. My father appeared in the kitchen doorway. His face flushed with a combination of anger and what looked remarkably like fear, his phone clutched in his hand. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded, voice low but intense, clearly trying to avoid creating a scene that guests might notice. Before I could respond, Uncle Steve appeared behind him, his usual florid complexion now ashen. "Richard, we need to talk. Now." His eyes landed on me, narrowing in confusion and dawning comprehension. Dad turned to him. "You too?" "My mortgage. Someone bought it." He says Uncle Steve gestured helplessly toward me. Jackson was next, phone in one hand, confusion evident on his face. "Dad, what's going on?" "I just got the strangest email about the nursery funding and the baby's college account." The three men stood in the kitchen doorway, forming an unintentional barrier between me and the rest of the party, each holding their phones like they'd been burned by them. Their expressions cycled through confusion, disbelief, and the beginnings of understanding as they looked between their devices and me, still standing calmly beside my open laptop. Dad found his voice first. "Everyone in the study. Now." He turned to a passing server. "If anyone asks, we're discussing a quick business matter. We'll rejoin the party shortly." As the four of us moved toward his wood-paneled sanctuary at the back of the house, I caught sight of Mom's face, a portrait of growing concern as she watched us leave the celebration. Her phone chimed in her hand, and I knew her moment of realization would follow shortly. Dad's study had always been forbidden territory when we were children, a masculine sanctuary of leather, mahogany, and the lingering scent of expensive cigars he occasionally indulged in despite Mom's disapproval. The room where important decisions were made, deals struck, family discipline administered. Being summoned there had never preceded anything positive in my childhood. Now, as the door closed behind the four of us, the power dynamic that had defined my entire life was visibly shifting. Dad automatically moved behind his imposing desk, but remained standing, too agitated to sit. Uncle Steve paced near the windows overlooking the manicured backyard where guests still mingled, oblivious to the drama unfolding inside. Jackson leaned against a bookshelf, his expression caught between anger and confusion. I chose to stand in the center of the room, refusing to take the supplicant's position in the visitor's chair. "Explain yourself. Now." Dad's voice had the commanding tone that had intimidated contractors, competitors, and children with equal effectiveness throughout his career. "The emails are self-explanatory," I replied, keeping my voice level. "I'm legally required to notify you of changes in debt ownership. The rest was courtesy." "This is some kind of joke." Uncle Steve turned from the window. "You don't have this kind of money. This is impossible." "Logitech Solutions," I said simply. "My company. Perhaps you've read about us in the Wall Street Journal or Forbes. The piece last month about revolutionizing retail supply chains mentioned we're entertaining acquisition offers starting at $800 million. The room went deadly quiet. Jackson straightened from his casual pose against the bookshelf. "You're lying," he said, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. "I'm not. Though I'm not surprised you think so. None of you have ever bothered to take my career seriously or ask genuine questions about my work. It was easier to maintain the narrative of Todd, the failure, the family disappointment, the one who couldn't cut it in the real world." "This is absurd," Dad interjected, but with less conviction than before. "If your company was worth that much, we'd have heard something. Would you?" You've made it abundantly clear over the years that my chosen field is beneath your notice. When I mentioned machine learning applications at Christmas, you changed the subject to Jackson's new sales territory. When I tried to explain our latest venture capital round at Thanksgiving, Mom interrupted to ask who wanted more turkey. You've been so committed to seeing me as a failure that you missed my success entirely. The door opened, and Mom entered, her social mask slipping to reveal genuine alarm. "Richard, what is happening?" "I just got a strange message about the country club membership." Her eyes landed on me, suspicion dawning. "What have you done?" "He claims his company is worth $800 million, Uncle Steve said, the disbelief still evident in his tone. "Says he owns our debt, my mortgage, funded the nursery, paid your club dues." Mom's perfectly composed expression faltered. "That's not possible. Todd works for some small computer company. They make websites or something. We create enterprise-level logistics management software," I corrected her automatically, the same explanation I'd given countless times that had never penetrated. "Our clients include 6 of the top 10 national retailers, 3 major shipping companies, and yes, ironically, 4 construction supply companies that compete directly with the family business." Dad moved out from behind his desk now, his business instincts overriding his initial dismissal. $800 million? That's the company valuation, not your personal stake. Correct. As co-founder and CTO, my equity share is 23%, plus stock options, plus salary and bonuses for the past 7 years, plus personal investments. I maintained eye contact with him. "My net worth exceeds the combined value of your company, this house, and all other family assets. By a considerable margin." The silence that followed was profound. I could practically see the recalculations happening behind their eyes, years of assumptions being rapidly reassessed, the family hierarchy being rewritten in real time. "Why didn't you tell us?" Jackson finally asked, his tone accusatory, as though my success and their ignorance of it were somehow additional offenses I had committed against them. "I tried. Dozens of times over the years. You weren't interested. And eventually, I realized your disinterest was giving me valuable information about how you really saw me. Not as someone to be proud of or support, but as the designated family failure, the cautionary tale, the negative example that made everyone else feel better about themselves." Mom had found her composure again, shifting tactically as she always did when social situations took unexpected turns. "Darling, that's not fair. We've always supported you. We were just concerned about your unconventional choices. If we'd known you were doing so well." "That's exactly my point," I interrupted, something I'd never dared do before. "If you'd known I was wealthy and successful, you would have treated me differently, which means your treatment of me was never about love or family, but about status and what you thought I could provide." "Now wait just a minute," Dad began, his face reddening. "No, I've waited years. Today I was handed a chore list instead of welcomed as a guest. At my own brother's baby shower, celebrating my future niece or nephew, I was told I was lucky to be let in the house and ordered to fill ice buckets while real family members and business associates were seated at beautifully arranged tables. "It was a misunderstanding," Mom attempted, her smile strained. "Of course you're family. We were just shorthanded with the help, and you're always so good with practical things." "Stop." My voice was quiet but firm. "No more gaslighting, no more rewriting reality. You've made your feelings clear for decades. I was simply naive enough to keep hoping something would change." Jackson stepped forward, always the negotiator. "Look, things got out of hand. We can fix this. Now that we know about your situation, we can start fresh. You're going to be an uncle. That's what matters now." I studied my brother, the golden child, the perfect son, now attempting to manage the situation as he'd been taught to manage all potential problems, with smooth words and strategic concessions. "You knew exactly what was happening today," I said, holding his gaze. "You invited me here under false pretenses, allowed me to be treated as hired help, and stood by watching. That's not something we start fresh from without acknowledgement and change." "What do you want?" Dad asked bluntly, always quickest to cut to the bottom line. "Why send these messages now? Is this some kind of threat? Leverage for a buyout?" The question was so revealing of his mindset, automatically assuming my actions must have a financial motive because that was the only value system he truly understood. "What I want is simple," I replied. "Respect. Basic human decency. To be treated as an equal member of this family, not an embarrassment to be hidden or exploited. I didn't acquire these financial positions as leverage, but as sound investments. I'm using them as leverage now because you've demonstrated repeatedly that nothing else gets your attention. So, this is blackmail, Uncle Steve concluded, finding familiar ground in casting me as the villain. No, it's a boundary. I'm done accepting mistreatment. You can choose to change how you interact with me, to build a healthier family dynamic, or you can choose to continue as you have been. But if you choose the latter, I will no longer quietly absorb the disrespect. There will be consequences, starting with a much more active management of the financial positions I've outlined in those emails. The threat was clear without being explicit. I could call Dad's company loans, foreclose on Uncle Steve's properties, withdraw the nursery and college funding, expose Mom's financial deception to her social circle. I wouldn't, at least not vindictively, but they didn't need to know that. You'd destroy your own family over hurt feelings? Mom asked, her voice rising with genuine alarm. I'm not destroying anything, I replied calmly. I'm simply no longer protecting you from the natural consequences of how you treat people, including me. Dad, ever the strategist, had been watching this exchange with calculating eyes. What specifically are you asking for? Acknowledgement of past behavior, a genuine apology, and concrete changes going forward, starting with introducing me to every person at this party as Jackson's brother and the baby's uncle, with the same pride you show when introducing him. The demand was simple but profound, requiring not just words but a public revision of the family narrative they'd cultivated for years. Jackson started to object, but Dad raised a hand to silence him, his business acumen recognizing when he had limited leverage. And if we do this, then nothing changes with the financial arrangements. Your loans, mortgages, funding, all continue exactly as they have been. I never wanted to use money as a weapon, Dad. You taught me that tactic, not by advice, but by example. The barb landed as intended, and for perhaps the first time, I saw my father flinch at criticism from me. A small victory, but significant. We need to get back to the guests, Mom interjected, always focused on appearances. People will be wondering where we've gone. Then you have a choice to make, I said simply. Continue treating me as an embarrassment to be hidden away, or start treating me as family. Your actions in the next few minutes will determine a lot about our future relationship. They exchanged glances, years of unspoken communication passing between them, recalculating their positions in light of new information. I waited, calm in the knowledge that regardless of their decision, I had finally stood up for myself. Whatever happened next, that victory couldn't be taken from me. I left the baby shower that day without a resolution. After our confrontation in the study, Mom had insisted we all return to the party to avoid gossip, promising we would discuss everything later as a family. Dad had introduced me to a few nearby guests as my son Todd, the tech entrepreneur, the words clearly unfamiliar and uncomfortable in his mouth. Jackson had made a point of calling me over during the gift opening to thank me publicly for the baby monitor, though the gesture felt performative rather than genuine. I departed early, declining the awkward invitation to stay longer that Mom extended, more concerned about appearances than connection. Driving away from that house, I felt lighter than I had in years, as though I'd set down a burden I hadn't fully recognized I was carrying. 3 weeks passed without contact from any of them. I returned to Seattle, diving back into work, telling myself I had done what I needed to do and the ball was in their court. If nothing changed, I was prepared to accept that and move forward with my life, maintaining only the most minimal contact required for managing our now complicated financial entanglements. The first overture came, surprisingly, from Jackson. A text message, brief and uncharacteristically humble. "Can we talk? Just you and me." We arranged a video call for the following evening. When his face appeared on my screen, he looked different somehow. The confident mask slipped to reveal something more vulnerable beneath. "I've been thinking about what you said," he began without preamble, "about how we've treated you. I didn't see it, or maybe I didn't want to see it. It was easier to go along with Mom and Dad's version of who you were than to challenge it. It's been the family dynamic since we were kids," I acknowledged, neither accusing nor excusing. "I'm going to be a father in less than 2 months," he continued. "It's making me think about a lot of things differently. The kind of father I want to be, the kind of example I want to set. He paused, seeming to struggle with his next words. "I don't want my kid growing up thinking it's okay to treat people the way I've treated you, even if those people are family. Especially if they're family." It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was sincere, and it opened a door to something new between us. We talked for nearly 2 hours that night. Really talked, in a way we hadn't since those early mornings fishing on the lake as teenagers. He asked questions about my company, my life in Seattle, listening with what seemed like genuine interest. I asked about his fears and hopes about becoming a father, and he answered without the bravado that typically characterized his conversations. "I'd like us to try again," he said as we were wrapping up. "To be brothers. For real this time." "I'd like that too," I replied, cautiously optimistic. My parents were slower to come around. Dad reached out next with a businesslike email suggesting a family meeting with a mediator present, his typical approach of handling emotional issues through formal structures. I countered by suggesting we begin with family therapy instead, something that would have been unthinkable to suggest before. To my surprise, they agreed. The first session was tense and awkward, held via video conference with a therapist I had found who specialized in family estrangement and reconciliation. Mom tried repeatedly to minimize past behaviors or reframe them as misunderstandings. Dad was stiff and uncomfortable with the format but made a visible effort to engage. We ended that first hour with little resolved, but a commitment to continue the process. Over the following months, through weekly sessions, difficult conversations began to yield small breakthroughs. There were setbacks, like when Dad referred to my success as lucky timing in the tech bubble, and I had to firmly correct him. There were moments of painful honesty, like when Mom finally admitted she had always favored Jackson because he was easier to understand and control. There were tearful apologies, some more genuine than others, but all representing steps toward healing. Amanda was the most resistant to change, having built her identity around her position in the family hierarchy. "So now we're all supposed to walk on eggshells around Todd because he has money?" she snapped during one particularly tense family video call. "No," I replied calmly. "You're supposed to treat me with the same respect you'd give any family member. The fact that you see basic decency as walking on eggshells is exactly the problem." Her journey toward understanding would be the longest, I realized, but even she eventually began to make tentative efforts, reaching out occasionally with questions about my life that weren't loaded with judgment. My niece was born in early spring, a tiny, perfect human named Lily, who knew nothing of family dysfunction or years of hurt feelings. I flew back for her birth, staying in a hotel but spending days at the hospital and later at Jackson and Megan's home, getting to know this new person who represented a chance for something different in our family story. Holding her, watching her tiny fingers wrap around mine, I felt a fierce determination that she would never know the kind of family dynamic I had grown up with. She would know her Uncle Todd as a constant, loving presence in her life, someone who was valued and respected by the rest of her family, not as the cautionary tale or family joke. The rebuilding process was slow and imperfect. There were still moments when old patterns emerged, when I had to set firm boundaries or remind my parents and siblings of our new understanding. But over time, those moments became less frequent, the new patterns of interaction becoming more natural. I maintained my financial positions, but never had to use them as leverage again after that initial confrontation. The knowledge they existed seemed to serve as a constant reminder to my family that the old power dynamic was permanently altered, that respect was no longer optional but necessary. The most profound change, however, wasn't in how my family treated me, but in how I saw myself. Standing up that day in the kitchen had broken something open inside me, releasing me from the need for their approval that had constrained me for so long. I discovered that while reconciliation was valuable and worth working for, my sense of self-worth no longer depended on their validation. I expanded my circle of chosen family, nurturing friendships with people who appreciated me for exactly who I was, not who they wanted me to be. I became more present and authentic in all my relationships, no longer carrying the constant low-grade anxiety that had accompanied family interactions for so many years. When Logitech finally accepted an acquisition offer nearly 18 months after the baby shower incident, I invited my entire family to Seattle for the signing ceremony and celebration. Watching Dad's face as he witnessed my name being announced alongside a figure that dwarfed anything his company had ever been worth was a complex moment. satisfaction mingled with compassion for the adjustments he was still making to see me as I truly was. The most valuable lesson from the entire journey wasn't about money or power, but about the courage to be authentic even when it's difficult, to stand up for yourself even when it means disrupting comfortable patterns. Self-respect isn't something others can give you. It's something you must claim for yourself, sometimes at significant cost. Family relationships are complex territories where love and hurt often coexist, where patterns established in childhood can endure for decades unless consciously disrupted. The work of healing those relationships isn't in pretending the hurt never happened, but in acknowledging it honestly and choosing to build something healthier moving forward. I look at my life now, with its blend of professional success, genuine relationships, and hard-won family peace, and recognize how different things might have been had I continued accepting mistreatment to maintain the illusion of family harmony. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do, both for yourself and ultimately for others, is to refuse to participate in dynamics that diminish any person's humanity and worth. If there's one thing I've learned that I'd want to share with anyone facing similar family dysfunction, it's this: your value isn't determined by how others treat you, but by the truth of who you are. And sometimes, standing firmly in that truth, even when it causes temporary discomfort, is the only path to lasting change and genuine connection. Have you ever had to stand up to family members who weren't treating you with respect? What boundaries have you had to set in your own relationships to protect your self-worth? Share your stories in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video if it resonated with you. Remember, sometimes the hardest conversations lead to the most important transformations. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it helps you find the courage to write your own ending when faced with similar challenges.